A few months ago, one of my US friends, Greg, sent me a message saying that he was going to be in Europe and he wanted to meet up while he was in France so we could go and do some camping and some hiking. It had been a couple years since I'd last seen Greg, and I'd been swamped with work recently, so I was long overdue a holiday. So a week just drinking beer, hiking around the mountains, that sounded like a good time to me. To say I was pumped for it, that would have been an understatement. I messaged him back immediately and we set up the plan. I'd drive to France from the UK with enough camping gear for the two of us, and I'd pick him up en route. I booked the time off work and made sure I had all the gear that we'd need. Then it was just a case of getting through the next couple of months of work, counting down the days to this much needed holiday. Well, the day finally came and it was an early start. I had to be out of the house at 3 a.m. to make the 2-hour drive to Folkestone to catch the 6 a.m. Eurotunnel train. For those of you that don't know, England and France are connected by a tunnel laid under the sea. It connects Folkestone in England to Calais in France. There's a train that runs through this tunnel and you drive your car onto it, and about 40 minutes later you drive off and you're in France. I get to the station a little early, so I'm the first in the queue, but it means I have to wait until they get ready to board. I crack open my second Red Bull of the day and start sipping. I know those things are terrible for you, but I'd been up since 3 a.m. and I needed the caffeine. Plus, I get the sugar-free version, which I like to pretend makes them a little bit healthier. Finally, they let us on, and being at the front of the queue means I get to the very front of the train, and that's great because it means I'll be the first off and I can just get going without having to wait for all the other cars to clear the train. So I pull onto the train, put the car in park, and I kill my engine. Then it's just a case of waiting for everyone else to get on, so it takes maybe another 20 minutes until the train starts to move. Looking in my mirrors, I can see other people getting out of their cars. Some are going to the bathroom, some are just stretching their legs. But I just lean my chair back, sit back and relax. I put on some music and I'm sipping my Red Bull until we're about halfway through the train ride, and then I start to need to go to the bathroom myself. So I get out of the car and I remember the car behind me was this young family with 2 kids. And from the looks of it, the little girl had just thrown up all over her seat from the way that Dad was wiping it down. He sees me looking, so I just offer him a sympathetic smile and continue on my way. When I'm in the toilet, the announcement system starts to go off, but there's no voice coming out of the speaker, it's just this warbled static, and at the same time, the lights start to flicker. It only lasts a few seconds before the lights return to normal and the announcement system shuts off. And at the time I remember thinking that it was a bit unusual, but it wasn't anything that I was worried about. The train was still moving, I figured it was just some sort of glitch and, something that I could just ignore. So I finish up and leave the toilet and I start back towards my car. It isn't until I've passed the car with the young family that I notice that something is wrong. Their car is empty and there's no one else loitering around in the carriage as there had been before. So I turn around to look at the other cars and I'm not seeing anybody in any of the cars. I walk down the length of the carriage just curious, looking into all the cars, but there is no one there. And I'm not really sure why, but I start getting that feeling, when you get a knot in your stomach and you just know that something really bad is about to happen. I keep trying to rationalise what I'm seeing, like, had all these people just decided to go on and walk into the other carriages? I mean, yeah, I guess that's possible, but this is a train, there's nowhere to go, and you stare out the windows, it's just pitch black tunnel, there's nothing to see, and all the carriages are identical. And the only way that anyone was getting off this train was if there was some sort of evacuation. But I'd been in that toilet for like 3 minutes at most. There was no way they could have done an evacuation in that length of time. I decide to check out the other carriages just to see if I can find anyone, but that knot in my stomach just keeps getting tighter, like I already know what I'm going to find. For those people who haven't been on the Eurotunnel, I should probably explain the way they're constructed. So they're divided into sort of 8 or 10 carriages, each with a small airlock space in between them. You push the button to release the door, you walk into the small airlock, you push the button on the next door, and you go through and you're into the next carriage. So I walk into the next carriage and it's the exact same thing. All the cars are empty, it's dead silent except for that constant rumble of the train running along its tracks. I pass by a set of stairs leading upwards, and I don't know if I mentioned this before, but these are double-decker trains. So you've got a bottom floor and you've got a top floor, and they're both identical. It's just so that you can fit more cars onto the train. I do briefly consider going upstairs to take a look, but I've got no reason to believe that it's going to be any different up there than it is down here. So I just keep going through these carriages, and one after another I check all the cars, I check the toilets, and they're all empty. And at this point I'm starting to freak out a little bit, because all these people can't have just disappeared. It's not possible. There's no way to get off the train while it's moving, and even if they could have gotten off, why would they? We're in a tunnel in the middle of the sea, there's nowhere for them to go. So I just keep progressing down this train, and eventually I come to the door that leads into the last carriage, and immediately I can tell that there's something different about this carriage. All the lights are off. So I push my way into the airlock, and then I'm just looking through the window trying to make out anything in the darkness, but all I can see is my own reflection. I pull out my phone and turn on the torch, then somewhat reluctantly I hit the button and I open the door. At first I don't see anything different in this carriage, just the usual empty cars, but then the light falls on a figure standing halfway down the carriage. At first I get a sense of relief, thinking I'd finally found someone who might be able to tell me just what the hell was going on around here. But then I actually got a good look at this person and the dread returned up just 100-fold. This man just standing there in the dark was wearing a black suit, and he must have been about 6'5". He grinned at me, and even from this distance I could see that his teeth were just sharp points. They were more like fangs really than teeth. But it wasn't his teeth that had me so scared, it was his face. It was upside down. And I know how crazy that sounds, and maybe upside down is the wrong way of saying it, because his whole face wasn't fully upside down. All his features were the right way up. But his mouth and his eyes had swapped place. So his mouth was sat just beneath his forehead, and his eyes were just drilling into me from just above his chin. So my heart is just racing 100 miles an hour, I'm starting to think that I might have a heart attack. I let that heavy door swing shut, pushing me back into the airlock where the lights are still on, and at least now there's a door between me and whatever the hell this creature is. Of course, now that creates the problem that I can't see into the last carriage anymore, so I'm just seeing my own reflection staring back at me, and I don't know what this creature is doing. But then I hear it, the slow, methodical echo of that creature's footsteps slowly approaching the door. And what terrified me the most at that moment was just how slow this thing was moving. It knew that it didn't have to be fast. It knew that I had nowhere to run and that there was no one left on this train to help me. So I just pushed that button and staggered back through the door into the carriage behind me, just as the lights in that airlock start to flicker, and then they go completely out. And still I can just hear those echoing footsteps getting closer, and then the sound of the door on the other side of the airlock being pushed open. Still, I can't see anything without the lights in the airlock, but I don't stick around long enough to see the next door open. I don't want to see that creature come into the light or to see the lights in the carriage that I'm in go out. So I race down this carriage as fast as I can, and I've just gotten into the next airlock when the lights in the carriage go out behind me. And at this point, I'm in a blind panic. I know that soon I'm going to run out of places to run, I'm going to get to the end of that train, and this thing is just going to follow me all that way, and then the lights will go out and I'm going to be trapped in the dark with this thing. I run through the next few carriages, just keen to put some distance between me and this creature. I pass by one of those flights of stairs that I mentioned, and I consider going up and trying my luck on the floor above, but I don't know what I'm going to find up there. It could be just as bad, so I just keep on moving down this train. I force myself to slow down then, knowing I've got a bit of time having put some distance between me and the creature, so I take some deep breaths. I need to think of a plan. I need to come up with some sort of way out of this. I consider just trying to hide, maybe ducking into one of the cars that's open, or just hiding behind one, and then hope that in the dark this creature might pass me by. But deep down I know that if I stay in a carriage in the dark with this thing, it's going to find me. I start opening the boots of the cars as I go past, searching for anything that could be used as a weapon. Some of them are locked, but most of them open. And eventually I come across a set of golf clubs. I grab 2 clubs out, I think it was a 6-iron and a wedge, and I take them with me. As I pass through the next airlock into the final carriage, I lay the wedge in the second doorway, stopping that door from fully closing. My thinking process is that if this works like a proper airlock, the first door shouldn't be able to open until that second door closes, so in theory the creature wouldn't be able to open the first door to get through. I knew at the time that this was a long shot, and I'm pretty sure those doors don't actually work that way, but I had to try something. After that, there's nothing else I can do other than run to my car, clutching that 6-iron close, get into the driver's seat, and I lock the doors. I pull a blanket off the back seat and just throw it over me, and then it's just a case of trying to control my breathing while feeling like I want to be sick, and waiting for that thing to come and get me. It doesn't take long, maybe a few minutes before I start to hear those echoing footsteps again, and then eventually the door into my carriage opens, the wedge having had no effect on the doors at all. And at that point, I don't think I've ever been as scared as I was at that moment. So I just sit there shaking, listening to these footsteps approach my car until they stop right by my door. Now I've got the blanket over me so I can't see anything, and to be fair, even if I didn't, it's pitch black with all the lights off, so I wouldn't have been able to see anything anyway. Then I hear my car door handle jiggle as this creature's trying to get in. And once it realises it's locked, it stops and the footsteps start again, just looping around my car, trying every single door handle. And I'm not even breathing at this point. I'm just sat underneath this blanket, eyes closed tight, just waiting for the end. And after trying the fourth door, clearly this thing's realised that the doors aren't going to open, and I just hear the footsteps slowly looping round my car 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, until eventually they come to a stop right outside my door again, and everything goes silent. And this silence feels like it's lasting forever, but in reality it was probably less than a minute, until there was this loud bang on my window and I couldn't help but jump out of my skin. Then there was another bang, louder this time, and another, each of the blows getting heavier, and I just know that at any second that window is going to smash and I'll be done for. I just remember thinking that if only the lights hadn't gone out, I could have at least tried to fight this thing off. I still had the 6-iron, I could have gone out on my feet if nothing else. And it's at that moment that I realised I can turn the lights back on. Maybe not the overhead train lights, but I'm sat in a car with powerful high beam headlights. I throw the blanket to the side without looking out the window. I make sure I do not look out that window. And as the car shakes from another blow, I feel for the keys, which thankfully I'd left in the ignition. I turn them and the dashboard lights up, and I'm still being careful not to look out the window. I don't want to see how close this thing is. And then in one movement, I throw the headlights on and throw myself into the passenger seat. I want to be able to get out of this car, get on my feet, and get set, ready for the fight that's coming. One thing I hadn't counted on was just how blinding that light would be after being sat in the dark for so long. I mean, I couldn't see anything for a good 10-20 seconds afterwards, just that blinding white light. Still, I stumbled out the passenger door, one hand shielding my eyes and the golf club raised in the other. I was ready to start swinging. I could only hope that the light had blinded that creature more than it did me. There had to be a reason that that creature brought darkness with it, right? I mean, maybe it couldn't stand the light. As the bright spots in my eyes started to fade, I could finally see that there was no one standing next to my driver's side door. And I'm just looking around desperately trying to figure out where this thing had gone, but I'm not seeing it anywhere. And in the state that I was in, with all that adrenaline pumping through my system, the fear, it just took me a few seconds to realise. The train's overhead lights were back on. Even once I noticed that the lights are back on, it still takes my brain a few seconds to start working again, and I look back down the carriage, and I can see in the car behind me those 2 young parents are just staring at me through their windshield, and they've got these looks of worry on their face like they're staring at a madman. And I realised that that's what I must look like to them. I've just half fallen out of the passenger side of my car, and I'm holding this golf club above my head like I'm ready to start attacking someone. Further down the carriage I can see a few other people milling about, but more importantly, as I look out the window, I can see clear blue sky. We've finally made it out of the tunnel. I just slowly dropped the golf club onto the passenger seat, and I'm just in a kind of stupor, like, what the hell had just happened? Where did that creature go? Where had all these people just come from? Like, had it all been a dream? I've got so many questions. Like, but if it had been a dream, where did I get that golf club? Because I know for sure it wasn't mine. I get the sudden urge to vomit, so I race down to the toilets, which luckily enough was unoccupied as everyone was starting to head back to their cars, given that we were close to our destination. And I just hurl up everything that's in my stomach. As I'm finishing, I hear the announcement system start to kick in, and for a split second I get a flashback to when it happened the last time, and my stomach drops. But thankfully this time a voice comes over it, just making the announcement that we're arriving soon and that everyone should get back into their car. So I wash up and I start to head back to my car. I'm just ready to be done with this train at this point. But in my head, I'm just trying to rationalise what must have happened. You know, maybe I'd had some sort of bad dream where I'd gone on a sleepwalk and I'd gone down the carriage and stolen someone's golf clubs, and none of it had actually happened and that creature wasn't real. And I wanted to believe it, even though I don't think I've ever sleptwalked before. But I wanted to believe it because it was better than the alternative. But then I get back to my car and I freeze, a chill just running down my spine. Now, I rarely ever get my car washed, and it had been a good while since I'd last bothered, so my car was pretty filthy. And in that dirt on my car, someone or something had drawn the same image all over my car. An upside down smiley face. But not just a regular upside down smiley face. This one was clearly meant to be the face of that creature in the tunnel. I just got back in my car, locked the doors, and as soon as that train came to a halt and they opened the doors, I sped away from that train as fast as I could. When I finally met up with Greg, I told him all about that experience, and me and Greg have had some strange encounters together in the past, so I know that he believes in the paranormal, and it was good to have someone to talk to who believed me. But I didn't want to let it ruin the trip, so I tried not to go on about it too much, and I've tried to forget about it over the last few days. But what's got me worried now is, in 2 days' time, my car is booked back onto the Eurotunnel to take me back to England, and I'm terrified to get back on that train. So Greg suggested that I share my story here and I get some outside opinions. So please comment below and tell me, what would you do? Would you risk going back on the Eurotunnel after that, or would you try to find some other way to get your car back home? And even more important, please let me know if you've ever had a run-in with the Eurotunnel Terror.